Spider-Man tried to rewrite fate, and fate rewrote him instead. One wrong choice shattered the timeline and unleashed a storm he couldn't outrun. This time, the villain wasn't a monster or a madman, it was time itself. Every life he saved caused another to slip away. Desperate to fix everything, he reached for the past, and the past reached back. While mending old mistakes, he found himself standing in the moment that defined his life. Uncle Ben's final day, but rewritten by the broken web of time. And in trying to save the timeline, Peter Parker became the lesson he feared the most. Spider-Man didn't plan to break time, he only wanted to stop one small tragedy. One petty thief, one small moment, the kind of crime he could stop in his sleep. But when he swung into that alley and grabbed the criminal before the man could run, something in the air shifted. A strange vibration rippled across the pavement, like reality had inhaled sharply and forgotten how to breathe out. Peter felt it instantly, a cold pulse behind his eyes, but brushed it off. Crime stopped. City safe. He swung away. New York looked normal, until it didn't. At first it was small. A street he knew by heart suddenly bent in the opposite direction. A billboard showed an ad for a company that didn't exist yesterday. His phone buzzed with messages from people he barely recognized, friends he never made, plans he never set. He shrugged it off as exhaustion, but deep down a chill spread through him. The world wasn't wrong. He was. By the next morning, the cracks grew wider. MJ didn't remember calling him last night, even though his phone showed a full conversation. Aunt May's house had a picture of a birthday party he knew never happened, and he was in it. The coffee shop he visited every day was suddenly boarded up with a sign that read, "Closed since 2018. Spider-Man's villains started appearing in new forms, Electro wearing tech that shouldn't exist yet, Vulture working with gadgets he'd never built. Every corner of the city was shifting like a deck of cards shuffled by an invisible hand. Peter realized the truth he didn't want to accept, stopping that one petty thief somehow tore the web of time. He didn't just save a life, he rewrote history, tiny threads twisting into chaos. Time wasn't just broken, it was angry. And it was coming for him. People vanished. Literally vanished, one blink and they were gone. Areas of the city flickered like a glitching video game. Spider-Man swung across Times Square only to watch giant screens glitch between different timelines, Stark Industries ads turning into Oscorp ads, then flipping to companies he'd never heard of. The skyline itself reshaped in front of his eyes. Even he began slipping. Moments of his own memory warped like corrupted files. He'd open his apartment door and find a completely different interior. He'd look at his suit and see new scratches from battles he hadn't fought yet. Faces of strangers gave him warm smiles like they'd known him for years, because maybe, in a version of time he accidentally created, they did. He tried fixing small cracks, undoing mistakes, stabilizing events he suspected had shifted. But every attempt made things worse. Save one life, lose another. Fix one timeline, break another. Time wasn't a web anymore, it was a storm, spiraling uncontrollably, pulling him toward a center he couldn't see. Spider-Man, the hero who always tried to save everyone, suddenly faced a terrifying possibility. The only way to save the timeline might be to sacrifice something far more personal than he ever imagined. Peter didn't have time to breathe. The moment he tried to analyze the chaos, reality hit back even harder. While swinging across Midtown, the sky above him fractured. A thin white crack split open the blue like a broken phone screen, shimmering with colors he couldn't name. People on the streets didn't notice, they kept walking, living their lives inside a world that was slowly tearing apart behind their backs. But Spider-Man saw everything. Then came the echoes. At first, he thought they were hallucinations, blurred shapes of people running along rooftops beside him. But when one of them flipped through the air with the same exact motion he used, Peter's blood froze. These weren't hallucinations. They were versions of him. Spider-Man from timelines that weren't supposed to exist, now bleeding into his reality like ink in water. One echo swung ahead of him, glitching and fading. Another crawled on a wall with panic in its movements. One wore a torn suit, another wore armor he'd never built. All of them were unstable, flickering like bad holograms. The timeline wasn't just broken, it was overlapping. And in every overlapping thread, Peter Parker was suffering. When he hit the rooftop of the Bugle building, an electric shock ripped through his spider sense so violently that it knocked him to his knees. He looked down at his hands, they were flickering. For half a second, his fingers were replaced with ones wearing a different suit. For a moment, he wasn't even himself. Time wasn't punishing him anymore. Time was replacing him. He scrambled to his feet and tried calling Dr. Strange, but the call didn't go through. The name in his contacts glitched to unavailable entity before disappearing entirely. Wong's number vanished next. Even the sanctum itself flickered off the map like it had never existed. The mystical defenders of reality were unreachable, maybe wiped out, maybe stuck in a different timeline, or worse. That's when the first collapse hit. A chunk of Manhattan, an entire block, blinked out of existence. 1 second it was there, the next it was a smoking crater, edges frayed like torn paper. Cars stopped. People screamed. Alarms blared. Spider-Man jumped toward the destruction but hit an invisible resistance, like a force field made of memories. The moment he touched it, flashbacks slammed into him, versions of that same street from a dozen different histories, some peaceful, some war-torn, some overgrown with vines. The street wasn't destroyed. It was being overridden by competing timelines. If the overlap spread, the whole city would become a buzzing, collapsing mess of realities fighting over the same space. No version would win. Everything would dissolve. Then he felt it. A pulse of something pulling him deeper into the disturbance, like the timeline was whispering, "Come fix what you broke." Spider-Man followed the pull instinctively. As he approached the epicenter, the world warped. Buildings stretched like rubber. Cars reversed direction on their own. Pedestrians mouthed sentences backward. And in the middle of the distortion, a rip in time hovered like a glowing wound. Behind it, he glimpsed a familiar figure, someone running. Someone he knew. His breath caught. It was Uncle Ben. Alive. Moving. Calling out for help. But the moment Peter took a step forward, the rip widened violently, sending a shockwave that nearly threw him off the building. Time wasn't tempting him. Time was testing him. And Peter Parker, for the first time since getting his powers, realized he might not be strong enough to face what waited on the other side. Peter didn't hesitate. The moment he saw Uncle Ben behind that glowing tear in reality, his heart slammed against his ribs like it was trying to escape his chest. For a split second, every memory he'd buried, every guilt, every lesson, every sleepless night, came rushing back with the force of a collapsing universe. Time didn't care. The tear widened, screaming with energy, and Peter dove straight into it. The world dissolved around him. Colors stretched. Sound bent. Gravity twisted. His body felt like it was being pulled through 1,000 different versions of itself. He wasn't moving through space, he was moving through possibilities. His spider sense went nuclear, vibrating like someone was drilling into his skull. He clenched his teeth and pushed forward, feeling pieces of time ripple past him like torn photographs. Then, impact. He crashed into a street. Not a street. His street. The one outside his old house. The pavement looked newer. The air felt warmer. His breaths came out shaky as he stood and saw it. The past. Unfiltered. Alive. A version of Queens untouched by years of battles and loss. Kids played outside with the same chalk drawings he remembered. A bus stopped at the corner, the old model he hadn't seen in years. And down the block, walking with a tired but gentle smile. Uncle Ben. Peter's legs almost gave out. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but nothing prepared him for the real thing. Ben looked younger. Stronger. His eyes held the same warmth that built Spider-Man long before the suit. Peter wanted to run to him, hug him, tell him everything, but he didn't. He couldn't. One wrong interaction and this entire timeline could implode. But the universe wasn't giving him choices. A distortion bled across the sky, dark, swirling, hungry. A corrupted version of the timeline was bleeding through, a chaotic one where crime ruled the streets and Spider-Man never existed. And from that distortion stepped a figure Peter recognized instantly, a broken echo of himself. Suit torn, eyes hollow, movements twitching as if he were glitching. A Spider-Man from a timeline where Uncle Ben never died, and Peter Parker became something darker. The echo locked eyes with him. Then it lunged. Peter barely dodged as the corrupted version swung a jagged, glitching webline. The ground shattered under the impact. Kids screamed. Cars swerved. Peter scrambled up a wall, but the echo followed instantly, climbing like a nightmare version of himself. It wasn't fighting to win, it was fighting to erase. Because timelines hate duplicates. Peter shot a web, slinging the echo into a parked truck. But the creature rose again, body flickering like broken video. Every second it existed, the timeline decayed more. Peter could feel pressure building, like reality was preparing to collapse this version of Queens to remove the contradiction. He had seconds. Uncle Ben stepped out of his house, drawn by the noise. "Peter," he called. Peter froze. Uncle Ben shouldn't have recognized his adult voice. But he had. The timeline was bending around him, trying to merge the Peters into one truth. Peter's distraction cost him. The Echo Spider-Man struck, hard. Peter crashed onto the sidewalk, pain exploding through him. The Echo stood over him, hand forming a glitching, unstable spike. One strike, and Peter would be erased from this version of time. But then, Uncle Ben stepped between them. "Hey!" Ben shouted, shielding Peter with his body. "Leave the boy alone." For a moment, everything stopped. Peter stared up at the man whose death defined his entire existence. Time had dragged him here for a reason. This wasn't just a fracture. It was a crossroads. And one wrong choice could doom every version of reality. The world froze around Peter like someone had hit pause on reality. Uncle Ben, alive, breathing, standing right in front of him, had just stepped between him and the corrupted Echo. Peter's heart cracked open. He wanted to scream, to pull Ben away, to tell him he had no idea what danger he was facing. But Ben didn't flinch. He looked at the glitching monster wearing Peter's face the same way he'd once looked at a thief with a gun, calm, steady, unafraid. The corrupted Spider-Man tilted its head, confused by Ben's presence. For the first time, it hesitated. Its movements glitched, jerky and uncertain. Ben had become an anomaly in this broken version of time, and the timeline didn't know how to process him. Peter dragged himself up, gasping for breath. Ben, get back. Please." Ben turned slightly, eyes softening. "Peter, what happened to you? Why do you look so scared?" Hearing his voice nearly broke Peter. It had been years since he'd heard it outside dreams and nightmares. But the distortion overhead cracked louder, ripping open a deeper tear as the corrupted Echo reoriented itself. It lunged at Ben. Peter moved before thinking. He fired a webline, yanking the Echo back with enough force to tear a lamppost down beside them. The two Spider-Men crashed through a mailbox, rolling across concrete as reality warped around them. Buildings flickered between timelines, his school turning into a half-destroyed bunker, then back into a pristine brick structure. The sky split into two different colors. Everything was spiraling. The Echo screamed, not a human scream, but a warping, static-drenched roar. Its chest glowed with unstable energy. It wasn't just a broken version of him. It was collapsing. And it wanted to take everything with it. Peter pinned it down, hands shaking. Up close, he could see its face glitching, half Peter, half something empty. Its eyes flickered with a hatred Peter knew too well, the hatred of a world where one moment of selfishness had cost everything. "Stop!" Peter shouted. "Ben's alive in your timeline, isn't he?" The monster froze. Peter saw it, the flicker of memory, the shadow of a life that never taught him responsibility. A world where Ben never died, where Peter Parker never learned why he had to be a hero. This version had grown without the lesson that defined him. "You think keeping him alive will fix everything," Peter said, voice cracking. "But it won't. It only breaks you." The echo lashed out, claws raking across Peter's mask. Peter webbed its hands down, pushing harder. Reality shuddered violently, like the universe was holding its breath. The timeline wanted this paradox resolved. Ben stepped closer, despite everything happening. "Peter, what is that thing?" Peter didn't look back. If he did, he'd fall apart. "A mistake," he whispered. "My mistake." The echo screamed again, body fracturing into shards of light and broken time. Peter knew what the timeline needed. He didn't want to do it. He had to. He slammed his hand onto the echo's chest, channeling every last ounce of strength and willpower. His spider sense synchronized with the unstable frequency of the corrupted version. He matched it, then forced it still. For one impossible second, the two versions of Peter Parker aligned. And the echo shattered like glass. A shockwave ripped outward, sending tremors through every corner of this timeline. Streets warped, trees flickered, children froze mid-run. Ben stumbled but stayed standing. Peter collapsed to his knees as the air crackled with energy. The timeline wasn't done with him. The tear widened again, its glow deepening, pulling at reality like a cosmic tide. And from its depths, Peter saw a horrifying truth. The timeline wasn't collapsing because he fought the echo. It was collapsing because he was here. He wasn't supposed to exist in this moment. He looked at Uncle Ben, alive, confused, scared, and everything inside Peter twisted painfully. This was the moment he had run from his whole life. The moment time itself was dragging him back to face. Ben reached toward him. "Peter, talk to me. Tell me what's going on." Peter's voice broke as he whispered the truth he never thought he'd say again. "I shouldn't be here, Ben." And the timeline began choosing which version of him would survive. The tear in reality roared open like a living storm, dragging wind, dust, and pieces of the street into its swirling center. Peter could barely stay on his feet. Uncle Ben reached for him, struggling against the pull, his coat whipping behind him like he was standing inside a hurricane. Peter's heart twisted. He had spent his whole life wishing he could have one more minute with this man, and now time itself was ripping that minute away. The crackling air whispered with overlapping voices, versions of Peter from fractured timelines echoing over one another. Some begged him to stay. Some screamed for help. Some warned him to run. But the loudest voice was the timeline itself, pushing him toward the choice it always wanted him to face. Two truths. Two futures. Only one could survive. Ben took a shaky step forward. "Peter, why are you disappearing?" Peter looked down. His hand was fading, breaking into particles of red and blue. His existence was being peeled apart thread by thread. "The timeline is correcting itself," Peter said, voice shaking. "I broke it. I shouldn't be here. If I stay, everything collapses." Ben's eyes glistened with fear and confusion, but also something Peter remembered from childhood, unshakable faith in him. "So what do you have to do?" Peter swallowed hard. "I have to let you go." The words almost killed him. The ground trembled. Houses flickered between ruins and normality. The sky split into multiple versions, sunny, stormy, night, day, all trying to overwrite each other. Time was seconds away from erasing everything. Ben moved closer, dragging his feet against the pull. "Peter, look at me." Peter forced his fading eyes up. "You've always blamed yourself for what happened to me," Ben said. "But it wasn't your fault. It was a moment. A terrible moment. But it didn't end you." Peter shook his head. "Ben, I became Spider-Man because of you." Ben smiled softly. "No. You became Spider-Man because you're a good man. The powers didn't make you. My death didn't make you. You made you. Peter's throat closed. He wasn't supposed to be hearing this. This wasn't part of any timeline. This was the universe giving him one final truth. Behind Ben, reality cracked again, bigger, louder, ready to swallow the street. Peter felt the pull intensify. His legs broke into fragments of light. His vision blurred. Time was screaming for a sacrifice. Ben stepped right up to him, placing a fading hand on Peter's shoulder. If letting me go saves the world, then let me go. I'm proud of you, son. More than you'll ever know. Tears spilled down Peter's face, evaporating before they touched his mask. He whispered, "Thank you, for everything." And then, he pushed himself into the tear. Not Ben. Not the city. Himself. The timeline surged like a tidal wave, engulfing Peter in blinding light. His body tore through collapsing realities, every version of him merging, collapsing, reformatting. He felt his memories stretch, break, rebuild. He felt the weight of sacrifice press into his soul like a burning brand. And then... silence. Peter gasped awake on a New York rooftop. The city was whole. The skyline stable. No cracks in the sky. No echoes. No distortions. He stood alone in the evening breeze. His phone buzzed. "Aunt May, dinner's getting cold. You okay, sweetheart?" He smiled softly, relieved, heartbroken, stronger than before. Uncle Ben wasn't back. The world was corrected. And somewhere deep inside, Peter knew the truth. He finally became the lesson Ben tried to teach. He didn't just honor Uncle Ben's sacrifice. He became it.